Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Johnson, and welcome back. Welcome back to my newsletter. And I'm bringing you somebody special today. I want to bring you an interview of Dr. Paula Petry, who has written a wonderful, wonderful book, A Mother's Courage to Awaken, about her journey through love and loss after um, her daughter passed. And so Paula and I belong to a club that no parent wants to join, and it's the club of the bereaved parent. And so we both were in this club together, and I really, really am so amazed by all that Paula has accomplished. Not only was she totally involved in the care of her daughter, and Paula, your daughter Alexandra had spinal bifida, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
so after her passing, then heard Paula's own journey to find healing for herself, and also her journey with her daughter Alexandra, who is around, and she's guided her and helped her through her journey. So we both kind of have this common too with our children who are in the other realm and yet are here, right here with us all the time. And so I would love to have you just talk a little bit about your book. I know you have a few little readings, so anything you would like to share, we're interested.
Wow. Thank you so much, Karen. I appreciate and spending time with you this morning. Our paths are amazingly similar, and the more we got to know each other, the more we saw those intersections. So thank you, and congratulations on your book as well. That's going to be out in the world before you know it, and your amazing journey as well.
Thank you.
Having a child with born with a disability, I think one of the sayings by Joseph Campbell that resonated with me. It's not an exact quote, but one that was true for me, and I think is true for so many people, not necessarily because of a child born with a disability, but as life is offering us up something different,
Mm.
strikingly different than what we had planned for. What do we do? You know, I was, and I'll get very emotional. And it doesn't mean that I haven't healed. It's just, it's all there, right? I'm still there, and not there. But, you know, I was a young mother. I married a man who's from Bogota, Colombia. The dream of this jet set life, right? I had left poverty, you know, or a limited life behind as I went away to college. There were two of us out of 31 cousins on my mother's side of the family who ventured away from family to pursue further education. I guess there's three of us, and one cousin became a nurse, but there's limited. And so off I went, and then I met this man, and it was, you know, he's from a wealthy family at one time, very wealthy in Bogota, and handsome, extremely ambitious, and we married, you know, and this was going to be a very different life than what I had been raised in. So the life I had planned was that one. He became a banker, international banking. We were a year in Puerto Rico, which I loved. And then his first assignment, which became our assignment when you're an expatriate with a bank at that time, banks did that, was in the Dominican Republic. And there I was, now pregnant. I had lost my first child and actually living in Manhattan, waiting 5 months for assignment, moving from one hotel to another. It was a life that I wasn't suited for at that time. However wonderful it sounds to me right now, like, oh, just give me Manhattan for
Yeah.
5 months and wander around. I mean, I did do it later.
freedom, right?
later.
Freedom.
I keep circling back. Another message in my book is I keep the snake eating its tail. It just keeps coming back. So I did do that later, but at the time it was not suited. But anyhow, so off we went to actually, on the same day, I was offered a job with McGraw-Hill to be international sales rep for McGraw-Hill. And my husband at the time got the call from, you now have an overseas assignment, and off we went to the Dominican Republic. Of course, my ambitions were talked about for about 1 second, right? It was a different era for women.
Yeah.
And I think for me particularly, it was hard. I didn't have my own path. I unable to carve that out. So I went with someone else's path, and believing that would be kind of big enough for the both of us. So off we went to the DR, and Alex was born there. And the day she was born, I remember walking, and I write about it in the book, going out for a walk because she was 2 weeks overdue. And with a friend, and she's like, aren't you worried about having a baby here? And I had come to terms with, babies are born everywhere. It's just a natural part of life. But it carried with it some struggle. It's huge struggle. And it gave me an opportunity, I believe, looking back now and understanding Joseph Campbell's work on the hero's journey and living the life you're given in order to be happy, to be fulfilled, not the one you planned for. And that was that she was born in a hospital with, all the lights went out that night in the entire city, because that was part of the dilemma at that time in the country, very extremely poor country.
Yeah.
1 in 10 children died at that time in childbirth. And we were in this private hospital, but I hadn't really toured it. I wore really, really thick blinders, and part of the courage to awaken, is you keep taking off the layers so you can see the world as it is, not as you need it to be because of your own, complexes, I would say. So there I was giving birth on a night where only the the generators of the hospital worked, which meant the emergency lights were on. So we arrived with a sleepy guard, kind of nodding off to sleep with one, light bulb above him with no fixture, and walked up some pretty dark stairs. And in the morning, 16 hours later, in the afternoon, 4 or 5, my daughter was born. With spina bifida, which means that the neural tube, as it develops in the womb at 9 weeks, it's fully developed, the neural tube. But with children with spina bifida, with myelomeningocele, the severe form, it does not fully develop. So the spinal column was on the outside of the back. And so it's a red bulge. So everybody knew but me. And my husband was in the delivery room, and there was just this silence when she was born that was, like deafening. And
did you know then that you had this idea something just wasn't quite?
Yeah. Then it was like it hit me, and then she was moved quickly from the hospital, from the delivery room. And she was put in an incubator, which I saw later. It was a metal box with a light in it, is the best way I could describe the incubator, which, maybe the States wasn't so different, at that time. Well, it was. Actually, the States was very different. But the 2 neurosurgeons who actually consulted with us and really almost quite directly recommended to leave Alex in the hospital to die. That our life would be ruined, our marriage would be ruined. This happens to people who are, they see this spina bifida with children who live in poverty, mothers who live in poverty. So there was my whole escaping poverty
Right.
right, right back in my face. It was like, oh no, there I am again. It's all my fault.
Right.
And
We go there, don't we? It's all my fault.
I know it's all my fault. So that was the horrendous. So that was my very beginning, and I had a choice, and I really sat on the fence. We took Alex home with us. I realized that she didn't go home with us. Now I just may never ever see her again. We were back in the hospital several times. People came. A couple came. Two women who were good friends. They weren't a couple, but two good friends popped in and said, I have a private plane. Let's get you to the States. But it was that time, in the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, he talks about the, it's a blueprint that we all have. We're part of our psyche. It's there for us. And when you read about it and go into detail about it, I believe by life's end, everyone has been on it a few times. And for me, it's the call to adventure. And I think women really, I would love for women to really recognize that parenthood is a call to adventure.
Yes.
By definition. And you don't know, it's stepping into the unknown. It's the Forrest Gump, the box of chocolates, right? And you don't know, the perfect child at birth brings other dilemmas, and challenges and along the way. Mine began at birth. And in the story of the hero's journey, across all traditions, what he found and what he mapped out for all of us is that if you answer the call, but then don't really take it, like hesitate, all hell breaks loose. And that's what happened when I almost rereading my story and reviewing Joseph Campbell. It wasn't even that long ago. I thought, oh my God, that's what happened. So Alex was back in the hospital, and we were on a drug trial for meningitis. Of course, the infection set in. The hospital was horrendous. They pulled down a rickety old crib from the attic. They kind of brushed off some of the dust. Ants came in through the window and filled her diaper. We then were outside, trying to get, now she had no shunt, part of children with disability with spina bifida, 80% end up needing that shunt that drains the neural fluid from the brain out external because it doesn't have a natural flow down the spinal column. We were, pulling up to see the neurosurgeon to have that drained because she didn't have a shunt. He goes, oh, did you bring the needles? There were no needles in the hospitals. There's no medications. In fact, the night that Alex was born, I had eclampsia undetected. So I was seizing all night long, which is, of course, preeclampsia. Eclampsia is deathly.
Yes.
My doctor identifies it in the morning. So we have all of this incredible drama that's set up with every possible challenge in the very beginning. My husband arrives, the doctor arrives because doctors are really on call at the hospital. And the nurses who have an 8th grade education run the hospital at that time in the 80s. This is 1984. So my doctor sends my husband out to a pharmacy for the medication, which was very difficult to find, and the needles to administer it.
Wow.
So that is the beginning. And that in contrast to what I had conjured up my mind to be is this life that I had so wanted for myself. So what do we do with all of that? And so that is the first kind of death. And we know from a shamanic perspective, as we know well, there's many deaths to get where our ultimate resurrections, right? It's like a death and resurrection. And you have to die into what is, and what was, being a mother. with a child with a, every possible problem. It wasn't,
You know,
and
in the
so,
Dominican Republic, you're not even in your own
yes,
culture, your own language
yes.
comfort zone. So,
No, neither one. My husband at the time wasn't either. We were both out of that, and we had relatively just arrived. So we had some friends that really helped us. Um, of course, that were there, and actually, my husband had worked for prior, a mentor was also there with AID working. So we had very little, not the. But what did family really want us to do? And I write about that. They don't know. My mother-in-law visited, and I overheard, baby, small child, small problems, big child, big problems, kind of like, really think about what you want to do here. So it was a very conflicted heart. But when my heart aligned, with my heart aligned with what my soul's path was to be,
mm,
my life just opened up. I
yeah.
received, as we know, the power of three.
Mm,
So I received, my Alex was back in the hospital, now no shunts, again meningitis. She aspirated on milk because they said I could give her milk, even though it was right after surgery. But you can't get your arms around the fact that these nurses that are informing you have an 8th grade education, and they don't know they don't know much either,
right.
and so
Mm,
um, yeah. So Alex is behind closed doors now, pneumonia, meningitis, 2 months old, has had a neurosurgery already, and the doctor comes out, the neurosurgeon comes out from another door. We were at one, and he's coming out the other door, and we begin to walk towards him. And I was raised in a church because many aunts were Seventh-day Adventists. If they weren't, they were Methodist or Baptist, and I went to all of them. So I knew the
oh, your
Lord's
face is
Prayer.
covered.
you know, I was saved in the Baptist church. I was baptized Methodist. I was like, but that was a long time ago. I was 34 years old, I guess. I don't, 32. And, but let me tell you, God doesn't forget us, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're there, spirits within ourselves. And as I walked towards the neurosurgeon, who looked very ashen, the Lord's Prayer I didn't like, oh, I need to pray. The Lord's Prayer went from head to toe in terms of energy,
Mm,
and the words just flowed through me. So that was one day. Then I walked out the hospital later that day to take a break, and I ran into a mother whose child I write about earlier had also born with a challenge. 12 years prior, they were expatriates. Their daughter was born outside of a country at the time. They're Germans. And she looked at me standing outside the hospital like, what are you doing here?
mm.
Why aren't you in the United States?
And you're probably asking yourself that. Well, it seems so complicated when you're in it.
I know, you're immobilized. There's fight, flight, or freeze. I mean, I freeze, and I still freeze, but now I know I need to breathe through it, and I'm freezing.
Yeah.
But we definitely froze and the indecision, because it was life altering. It was
Yes.
like, it was such a high contrast to what we had planned for. So that was the second thing. The third thing was that next day in the hospital, we had someone who would bring us our mail. Was a letter. It was 3 pages long, from a friend in Chicago, and I was from Rockford, 90 miles away. And she said, here are the names, phone numbers, and addresses of all the specialists related to the spina bifida clinic at the Children's Memorial Hospital in Chicago.
Uh-huh.
And so, you know, that threesome, right? You can't ignore it. Oh, you missed that one. Okay, all right, we'll send you another one. You know, we'll send you a third one. And
Paula, Paula, wake up, Paula, wake up.
I know,
Right?
I know. So it was, there we were.
Oh,
There we were. And so the next day I was at the embassy getting my Alex a passport, and the doctors were hesitant, but the neurosurgeon got on the phone with the neurosurgeon in Chicago, and 3 days later we were on the airplane.
oh,
And then life, that was it. That was my door. I walked through.
yes.
So that's the door, and I walked through, and then it was like that. They matched me with parents who had a child with also a spina bifida. The statistics were radically different of life expectancy and what she was going to be able to do. And we eventually, that by that next year, we were transferred. We could transfer to New York, New York City or Miami, and we chose Miami.
Yeah.
And
But
and then
that was at the end of your, I mean, you became a fighter for your daughter too, all through the system. So
no,
you embraced this. You didn't just say, okay, I'm going to be her mother. You became her advocate.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, I did. That was the, that was my path.
Yes.
And so I had seen the starkness of realities in the DR. And I got to Miami, and within 6 months, I wrote my first letter to a community, to a state agency, saying, you know, you say you're doing this, but you're not, because I can't get my daughter evaluated, because our whole human services system, which you know have dealt with also, was in collapse. It was on its seventh administrator within 2 years. No services, they were all on paper. All the services were on paper, but they weren't in reality. And it was like, oh no, this is the paper. I read the paper. I was very concrete. I'm still concrete. Like, I read it, it's there. I want it, you know. So
Right.
I had my daughter evaluated. I got her into a program, and then I was invited to a meeting. So in the 80s, with disability for Florida, some of it had more action was happening in the 70s. And of course, parents helped pass the legislation to help children move from church basements, you know, or classrooms into public schools in the 70s and 80s. So Florida was just beginning a parent to parent support model. And the person who's my lifelong now friend came to Miami. I was invited to attend as a parent by social workers who now knew me. And I attended, and I signed up. You know, there was no hesitation. There's few things I've done in my life where there's no hesitation. One of them was that. And the other one, probably, I mean, that comes to mind, there's probably others, was reading Alberto Villoldo's book and going, oh, that's what I'm doing. You know, like, no hesitation, like, I'm there. Like,
Yeah.
so that was that. And I then formed, there's the professionals involved. There were 3 of us. The other 2 were social workers. They faded away. It landed on me. And I put together a board of directors for Parent to Parent in Miami in 1986. And I wherever I went, I met parents that were eager to become board members, who've now still lifelong friends, as we formed the first board, became a nonprofit. And there was nothing, you know, I mean, there had been longtime parents advocating for what was, but if you can think of, there's no directory of services, there's no phone number to call, there's no how to get in contact with another parent. Of course, there's no internet. We had phones that were on the wall. I
Right.
talk about nice that I had a long, you know, extension cord to my phone, you know,
For the day.
because I was all over my house.
We forget how, how the world has shifted and how much more access we have to information. You had to create it.
Yes. Yeah, we did. I
Wow.
was hired to create the first, what was called the Central Directory for parents of children with disabilities, or for anybody. You know, it began in, I don't know when it was, 90. I was given space within the school system, the Diagnostic Center for Early Childhood. became very involved because of my own personal experience to really take on the role of the parent in professional spheres. So I sat on task forces and councils. I was 25 years on the Early Childhood Council. I, I really demanded respect. Because when you think of disability, you have 75, 80% of those families are Medicaid eligible, just to identify it as an income um, um, reality for families. And also, I think way too used to not being respected.
Yes.
And so along came the middle class families and went, but we're not doing that. Why aren't we getting this? We want that. And then we organized ourselves. So we came in masses, right? So we created so much change by organizing ourselves together and coming clear on the issues that we wanted to back and support. And then in very articulate ways, we became very articulate
Yeah.
across the country, of what we wanted for our children.
Yeah.
And that's what I
I think you
began to
fought
do.
the good fight, and then there came the day when Alex passed,
Yes.
and that created a whole new reality.
It was actually I have,
It was
let me see.
unexpected too. It
It
was
was so unexpected. And I think for my book, I may have marked something that um, let's see. Oh wait. Yeah, maybe I read a little bit.
sure.
Yes, yes, the very so this is my book.
Mother's Courage with Everybody. That's her book. Yeah.
Yeah, by Manga Publishing. So many synchronicities and making everything happen that we could talk all day about our synchronicities. But as Deepak Chopra says, there's synchronicities, the wink of the universe, the three things that happened on that particular day in the DR, but there's synchrodestinies. And that
Mm.
was the birth of my daughter, and synchrodestiny, the death of my daughter. There was no, that was the plan beforehand. And uh, I I had I ended up for 12 years, and most of that as a director of training in the School of Medicine, Department of Pediatrics, within a child Mailman Center, Diagnostic and Intervention Center for children with special needs disabilities. Funded, you probably know that legislation in the 60s through the Kennedy administration, and it goes on, to prepare professionals to work with children with disabilities, because none of that was happening. They weren't in schools. What do we now do? Here they are.
What you were
So
doing after your daughter passed. But I think the beauty of this is you still didn't quit.
yes, yeah,
You embraced all children with disabilities. I mean, your mother's heart was so big that you've embraced
yeah.
everybody, all children, all parents. I mean, you're still reaching out all the time. And I think that's so much the beauty of it, you know. But
Yeah.
yeah, there was something you wanted to read.
Yes. So after, just to say that, yes, after Alex passed, I did remain for quite a few years, maybe a bit too long. I talk about that in the book.
Mhm.
Um, um, and training on grief and loss to pediatric residents and many others. I developed a whole curriculum, Understanding a Family's Perspective, and that became a core curriculum for all of our trainees that were 70 every year that came through the Mailman Center from 8 different disciplines. So it came the day that no longer resonated with me. I didn't know what to do about it. I was the sole support for my son who's in college. So I decided that I would sell my house and to have that money, and I had a little bit of other money, and then just step out into the void. I was in the midst of finishing my dissertation, defended it at age 55, so anybody who thinks they're too old or something had passed them by,
Yeah.
rethink it, right? Rethink it. So anyhow, I was invited.
Step out into the void. I mean, it's almost like you just have to, it's what the universe wants. It's like you just have to make the big step like hummingbird without enough wings, no food, no water, and you just say yes and step out into the void.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So yeah.
did. So I resigned. I sold my house. My last day was on a Friday, and Sunday I sold my house.
Wow.
And it sold in 3 weeks. It took me a while to prepare it. It sold in 3 weeks. It was market price. The end of '06. 1 month later, the housing market crash began of '07. So I had my pile of cash, had no idea what I was doing, and I was set free. So I put everything in store. Well, I gave most everything away, and then put whatever in storage, and I was free. And I thought, well, 6 months, I'll have another position. I wanted to move from Miami. Karen, I had no idea, absolutely zero. And I was invited to this meeting, spiritual group, never understood what they were about, but I went, and she announces that a medium, grief psychologist medium, was coming to Miami, and she was supporting his whatever. It was like this business arrangement she made. She had a PhD in transpersonal psychology. He's coming, he's helping people. When she announced that his first day of seeing people was July 5th, which was the anniversary of my daughter's death, which was 11 years after my daughter had passed, I was like, I'm there. That was another, I'm there. Like my hand went up, make the appointment. I was his first appointment.
I love it.
Like, okay, so let me see. What did I do now? I'm Mystic 127th attack. Okay, so his name's Bert Farr. I'm gonna interview him too. It's on my stuff.
Beautiful.
But Bert became a mentor to me. Our long conversation shaped my current views on life and death. I learned that each lifetime comes with a blueprint, one we all ourselves create based on what we want to achieve in that lifetime. Some parts of the blueprint we can alter and some not. I now understanding that having a child with a disability along with a child's death may at times be a fixed piece of the architecture. Alex's birth and death were planned occurrences that brought the deepest sorrow as well as the opportunity. And that's like why I wrote the book.
Yes.
That's why I brought that, because we have to, as we shift to see this, and it took, to see our unplanned occurrences as opportunities.
Yes.
We rewrite our story, right? Our meaning and purpose can unfolds from the perception of opportunity. It does not unfold, as you know well, from perception of victim, of a poor me. There's no opportunity that can unfold from that.
Yeah.
So as I embraced Alex's disability, the opportunity for me to my own human development, to find that lion voice within myself, unfolded.
Oh, I love it. I love that in you. And it's so apparent. It still is, I can see it,
And let me see, if I had Alex's birth and death were planned occurrences that brought the deepest sorrow, as well as the opportunity to grow and expand in ways that would have been otherwise unattainable, right? With time, I saw how the very nature of Alex's death was in perfect alignment with my darkest self torments. To fully live life, I would have to choose to resolve them.
Yes.
Yeah. The timing of my encounter with the mystic was no accident. I was uprooted, having sold my home, resigned my position at the medical school. My personal finances were flush for the first time in my life. Jaime, my son, was away at college. My therapist, who I saw for many, many years, including 5 years on the couch, had moved to Tennessee. Most importantly, I was soon to complete my doctoral degree in March of 2008. However, it was in special education, a field of study I was no longer interested in teaching. right? So now what? And so everything unfolded from there. Had dinner with a longtime friend, and our husbands were bankers. We were kind of bored wives in terms of wifehood, both divorced, and she had gone to India and met all these people and was teaching the Akashic records. I was like, Paula, come, and I was telling her about
That
the psychic. And she's like, come, I'll do a class for you. So my best friend and I went. We were the only two. Then I go out to lunch with this wonderful person who was also working with the Dean of Education. That was part of my doctoral work. And she said, I said, do you know anything about mystics, psychics, blah, blah. She looked at me, she goes, my mother-in-law makes the jewelry for Carolyn Mace.
oh,
I'm going to be in Chicago next week. So I go buy jewelry from the person, Carolyn Mace's jewelry maker. And then she said, who you really would love to meet is Claudia Edwards. She's a clinical psychologist, but she's also a shaman. I'm like, uh-oh, because my BA was in anthropology, and I lived in Latin America for 5 years, part of it being Mexico archaeology students. So I'm like, so at the end of, I wish I had Alberto's book here, in front of me, but at the end of my session with Claudia, who she unfolds her mesa, which stone do you want to work with? And I chose the stone that represented Paul, who was her brother, who was a priest who had passed away. She goes, well, this is interesting. The stone you chose. And she handed me Alberto's book, Courageous Dreaming, as I ended the session, and lent it to me. And I looked at the back cover when I got into the car, not even home. And Alberto's photo was there, a description, medical anthropology, was like, oh, I need to meet this guy. Whatever he has to say, I'm reading it. I mean, I poured through the book, right?
yeah.
And that was it, that was it. I saw
You,
Claudia a
so
bunch of times.
you've become a shaman. I mean, you took the class, you did the 4 winds, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and so yeah, I love this, and I love you to touch a little bit about your book and how how it guides people, how it helps people. You have
Yeah.
so many practices in there: holistic practices, alternative health practices, sound healing, plant medicine. I mean, you've gone through all of it. You really dove deep into all of it: Akashic record, shamanism, acupuncture, healing mantras, all of it. So give us a little bit about how you see how do you see somebody using your book?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all told in story form. So it is um, the healing, what they will learn from reading about the practices that I delved into was how they supported me. And
Mhm.
that in that they can see themselves in that. If she can do it, I can do it, right? And I have a very atypical background. I mean, I'm um, so it can identify a lot of different people from different walks of life can identify with it.
Yeah.
So it's, and coming to understand to some degree, the invisible world and the existence of it. I think through the Akashic record story, I put out a shingle right away. I learned something, and I've always been like this. I learn it and I give it away. And
Mm.
so I tell the stories in there of people who come to me from the other side to support the person who's asked for help, and
Yeah.
how I was connected through time with this particular individual, and his brother who had passed away came into the reading, and I could see his brother clear as day.
Mm.
And the wife, he's Nigerian, so his brother actually, it's an interesting, I have so many interesting odd things that happen, but this was somebody I'd met in college in 1978. He said I was the only kind person there. Can you imagine? Coming from Nigeria into the Midwest in a tiny college. And we became friends. And he found me 38 years later, but who know how. And then I said, well, I'm doing readings. Can I help you? Well, his brother, actually, true story, was the king of the Igbo tribe in Nigeria.
Mm.
And he had this huge, I had no idea, but he had this huge falling out with his brother. So I was going to do a reading as a friend. He was just trying to reconnect with me, maybe hopeful, and agreed. That was that. But, you know, Spirit has a whole other plan.
Oh, a different agenda. Sometimes I think Spirit's just laughing at us like, oh, yeah, you think you know. Okay.
All the time. All the time laughing.
Yeah.
Now I set out on something and I'm like, oh, but God only knows what this is really about. It's never about what we think it is, right?
No.
So that morning I wake up, I was in the small studio apartment, something to do with my brother, whatever. And so that morning I wake up and there's like, oh my God. And I'm a novice, you know, it's like, wow, there's somebody in my room. So I recognized that it was, his name's Joseph, and he's in my book and, you know, fine with it all. So I will tell. So it's like, oh, that's like you, right? You begin to hear, like I hear, I sense and hear. But he was so powerful, I was seeing him. And so it's like, wow, he's there. So that story, and then what happened was, and Joseph called at his time, and the brother it was a forgiving session. It was a session all about forgiveness, where Joseph admitted that he was very stubborn, and his brother apologized for blocking. Joseph had gone to Nigeria after finishing his PhD for a visit, but his brother had different plans for him, blocked his American passport back out of Nigeria for 6 months, making it that he was late returning to the States for his first assignment as a math professor. And so all of that, and they didn't talk for, I don't know, 15 years, and his brother passed away. So there it was, you know, all taking place, destined to take place, to allow for this healing between two brothers to occur. And so I described the woman next to his brother, and he goes, well, my brother had 23 wives. Describe her. I'm not sure. And then I described, and he goes, oh, I know who it is. So it's a story that becomes perhaps believable because I'm one, I'm a truth teller, but my background isn't to convince people for anything, right? My background isn't this. It's an entirely different background. So people become curious, as Dr. Eugene Ahn, a friend of mine, oncologist who wrote an endorsement, he goes, I think people have more questions than they had when they first opened your book. And that's what I want, is we awaken through questions. When we think we have the answers, things happen to us, we realize we don't have the answer, or there's this seeking to find a truth. And that was the seeking 11 years after with my daughter, and life after death. Big question, where do we go when we die? Yes. And I think for all of us, particularly right now, Karen, right? That is a question on everybody's mind.
Yes.
How to hang on to life, and what if I don't? And what if my loved one hasn't? And how do 33% of Americans, least likely population in the world, other than other Western parts of Western world, have afterlife experiences with their loved one.
Yes.
Of some sort, right? A friend, all the pictures on the wall were moved when he got home from the funeral. The rose bush in the winter bloomed. I mean, the hearing in the middle of the night, the phone that rings that they're not there. I mean, tons of things. And I've had many experiences,
Yes.
with my daughter, from her passing, including,
Mhm.
the very beginning at that reading with Bert Farr as a medium.
Yeah.
So when we come to recognize or become curious about life after death, and
Yes.
really open ourselves up to all the research, tons of it, about that existence. And now science is telling us more and more of that probability of
Yeah.
effect.
And
Um,
thinking out of the closet, sometimes people have these experiences, they don't even want to tell somebody because they'll say, oh, you're hallucinating. Oh, you clearly need to see a doctor, or you need some medicine, right? It's kind of not, or hasn't been mainstream. And
right,
so a lot of people are carrying this in a way that is unhealthy. And now, by your experience, like, okay, somebody else has this. Somebody else is there too. I can express this. I can feel it. It wasn't my imagination. It was real and it has meaning.
yes,
Yeah,
yes, that's
that's
so true. And when we do share these experiences, maybe even with our medical and other professionals who are helping us, right? Um, there's come to it's kind of a blasé response, like,
Mhm.
that's nice,
Yes.
I'm
Pat you on the head.
oh, you poor soul.
You poor soul.
You're grasping at straws, but we won't say anything, right?
Right, right.
I know.
You got it.
I know, right? Not helpful.
Not helpful. No.
No, you're
And
like,
instead, embracing and saying, oh, that's great. That's absolutely right. You're in contact. This is wonderful. This is going to support your journey. There's so much to learn. There's so much we don't know. It's like seeing into the unseen realms. So I had experience with your daughter. I mean, we were doing a class together, and all of a sudden I hear this little voice go, I like you, right? And I was just like, okay, that's Alex for sure, right? And it's like being open to that. If I
yeah,
had been totally closed, I'd have been like, oh, I'm hearing, what's that? Close it off. But just being
yeah.
able to share that with you and say, oh, I just heard Alex say, I like you, you know. And it just gives the world a whole new dimension. Instead of like we're here in this 3D reality, it opens you a little to just see a little more. There's maybe a little more out there. And maybe death isn't, I used to think I didn't believe in anything before my son passed. I thought death is, that's it. You're dead. That's it. You're gone. But there's so much more. And they have a life after death, and they have things they do. And we too, we're on this journey, as above, so below. And
Mm.
as they journey, we're journeying, and we're connected. We're still, people say, well, they're in heaven. And I'm like, well, heaven's not prison. They're allowed out, right? They can come visit.
I'll remember that one, Karen.
Yeah, they can get a pass, a day pass.
Visitors pass. I'm going to see my mother.
you know,
Mother, okay, she's on the list.
right, right. Oh gosh. So yeah, there's just so much more to it, right?
It's a mystery. Oh my gosh. It, it's changed my life in like 360 is the word that comes to me, like 360
Yeah.
degrees from, like you say, from flat 2D almost,
2D maybe.
that was kind of 2D.
I started at 2D. I'm quite sure.
It's not written in the word.
It just wasn't part of my upbringing. I just didn't, it wasn't even in my, like you talk about, you shift your reality totally. The one last question, what is the one thing you wish parents and kids knew about life?
Well, yeah, I'm now teaching with the Light Work Education and Wellness Center, a new nonprofit school based in Miami. It's virtual, so it's good. I'm here in upstate New York, as you know. And I'm teaching the medicine wheel, so it comes to mind what I would like, what is it that I want to achieve mostly in that, is the power that we have in co-creating our lives.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that once we have this sense of who we are, just for me, we have so much, we know we have chakras, we know we have an auric field, we know we have an electromagnetic field, we know we're connected into something. And then building experiences into that connection. People are wanting, and children, it's amazing how much they get so quickly. Um, that uh, that connection, and I'm coming into through nature, because as we see ourselves connected with all, as above as below,
Mhm.
as outside of self, within ourselves. So
Mhm.
my teaching is in that vein of teaching children and parents. I have a medicine wheel course as well for the parents that come into the school, that there is this connectedness with all that is. And in that powerful field in which we dwell, we're all in the same soup. We have the power for parents to send affirmative, loving
Yeah.
messages to our children, or we can kind of load upon them all of our worry and doubt and fear. And they will receive both.
Yeah.
We're not indiscriminate, right? I mean, God doesn't intervene. So it is the power of thought, the power of co-creation, and how it is that we can best help and support our children, especially when we see in these times where it's so much turmoil. As it was in mine with my daughter, I spent, for my son, after my daughter died, so much of my brain power went into worry.
Yes.
And then it's no longer, I mean, I may spin in that direction, but I catch myself.
Yes.
No, I affirm his strength. I affirm his ability. I affirm, and so that's my message. It's for both parents and children. We co-create our reality. We co-create and that what manifests first in the invisible world is what then comes into our physical form. So
Yeah.
what is it that we praying for? What are we praying for? Means what are our thoughts paying attention to? And
Mhm.
so we want to put our thoughts in the direction that is going to create what it is that we want. And we begin with self. I was so self-absorbed, in our healing pain we are. And then we move more and more and more in terms of what we want to create for the world. And
Yes.
it's all within
I
the
love
same
watching you
core.
create this.
Yeah.
And one thing I'd like to leave people with is this concept of opportunity. So many parents with children that have disabilities, they're lost in, oh my God, what next? What the fear and the anxiety and it's not easy and it doesn't end. A child with a disability of
Yeah.
any kind,
Yes.
even one that's, if it's drugs, if it's alcohol, whatever it is that is taking their life force, you feel like there's no way out, there's no hope. And to turn that on its head and see opportunity
Mhm.
where you didn't see it before, and see a path that's so beautiful. And I think that's what your book does so beautifully, allows people to see opportunity.
Yeah. The hero's journey is opportunity. It's the message.
Yes, I love that. I
Yeah.
love.
And find ourselves into the belly of the whale. And we,
Yes, and some people get lost there. It's easy to get stuck, and so it's, your book is a way to get unstuck, to get out of the belly of the whale. Hmm.
yes.
Find a way out. Well, thank you so much. Oh my gosh. The book is, by the time this interview is out, the book will be out and available. And I'll give all the details on my website about the name and everything. So anybody who's looking, anybody has a child or knows anybody with a child that has any kind of disability or already has suffered the loss of a child, Paula's book is really a gem and I highly recommend it. Yeah.
Mm,
All right. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank
Okay.
you for having me.
You are so welcome. Much love.
For everybody. Much love. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.